Summer had arrived. The nights were thick and suffocating with heat. In this quiet countryside village, it was a habit for people, young and old, to bring out their bamboo mats in the evening, sit under the open sky, wave their fans, and listen to the radio while cooling off. Mr. Toma and his family were no different. After dinner, he would carry out his teapot and reclining chair to the middle of the yard, sipping tea and enjoying the breeze. Lighting a cigarette, he took a long drag, sipped his tea, and leaned back in his chair, gazing up at the night sky. Through the haze of smoke, he slowly drifted into memories of his youthful days. Leon, his daughter, had finished washing the dishes and spread a mat beside him. She turned on the radio, started peeling fruit, and sat close to her father. In the dim golden light spilling out from the house, Mr. Toma looked at her. She was beautiful, just like her mother had once been. Mr. Bag Toma was a small-built man with sun-darkened skin. At 53 years old, he lived in Tran Village, Vuan Commune. He made a living selling snacks and toys at the local primary school gate, carrying everything on a simple shoulder pole: candies, small trinkets, fruits, and toys. It wasn't much, just enough to scrape by, but that little vendor's pole had carried the weight of his entire family for years. He had raised his children alone for over a decade since his wife passed away. His elder son, Kenji, now 23, had always been unruly. Instead of studying, he spent his days wandering and hanging out with bad crowds. 5 years ago, after graduating high school, he suddenly disappeared. No goodbye, no letters. No one knew where he had gone, or even if he was still alive. Now it was just him and his second child, Leon. Her real name was Thuy, but everyone in the village called her Leon. It stuck. Only at school did anyone call her Thuy. At home, she was simply Leon. She was 13 and in 7th grade at the village's middle school. Clever and quick-witted, she understood how hard her father worked and took care of him like a grown-up. But Leon had one heartbreaking affliction: she couldn't speak. She had been born healthy, like any other child. But when she was 9, something happened. One afternoon, she and a group of village children had taken the cows to graze and dared each other to explore the village's cemetery. That night, she came down with a high fever and convulsions. Mr. Toma rushed her to the local hospital, but the symptoms didn't improve. When asked, her friends said that during their playtime, Leanne had complained of tired legs and lay down on a patch of ground, right atop an unmarked grave, no headstone, only a few old incense sticks. Probably a drifter's resting place. The villagers whispered that she had offended the dead, disturbed the spirits. They advised Mr. Toma to make offerings and hold a ritual to apologize. Though skeptical, he complied. He spent money he couldn't spare to hire a monk, bring incense and fruit, and perform rites at the grave. That very night, Lan's fever broke. But since then, she hadn't spoken a single word. The doctor said her prolonged fever might have caused damage to her tongue, and that perhaps with time, she could relearn to speak. But 4 years had passed. Nothing changed. At first, she had tried to make sounds, but they came out as soft whimpers, almost like a dog's. Embarrassed, she eventually gave up trying. Now, she was always silent. Mr. Toma had learned to accept it. She was still his precious daughter, no matter what. He reached out and gently stroked her hair. Leanne, small and pale with big round eyes, offered him a freshly peeled slice of pear. He smiled and took it. She was mute. But that didn't matter. She was his daughter, his little princess, his whole world. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through, rustling the bamboo by the gate. The hot summer night was disrupted by a burst of wind. Mr. Toma looked up at the sky and muttered, "With this wind, there's bound to be a heavy rain. Let's bring everything inside." Leon nodded and picked up the radio and fruit dish. Mr. Toma gathered the chair and mat, laying it down again under the porch to sit out the storm. Rain came quickly, thick, heavy, the first downpour of the season. The air became cleaner, cooler. The two of them sat watching the rain fall in sheets, droplets dancing down the roof and forming large glistening bubbles on the ground. Then something caught Mr. Toma's eye, a shadow moving past the gate. The rain grew heavier. The sound of it hitting the roof was so loud, even sitting next to each other, they could barely hear one another. He turned to Lan and shouted, "Did you lock the gate earlier?" Lion shook her head. His heart skipped. Someone was walking into their yard. The figure approached slowly, a tall, skinny young man in tattered clothes. His bare feet slapped the wet ground, his legs bony like sticks. His hair hung long and dripping over his face. In one hand he held a wooden cane, the other wrapped in bandages. He looked homeless. His face was obscured in the downpour. Leanne turned pale and hid behind her father. Mr. Toma steadied himself and called out, "Who's there? What are you doing in my house at this hour?" The stranger called back, his voice loud over the rain. "I'm hungry." Could he be mad or worse, dangerous? But the man didn't come closer. He just stood there, letting the rain soak him through. If he had ill intentions, he'd have rushed them by now. Perhaps he was just mentally ill, wandering the streets, moved by pity. Mr. Rock. Toma shouted again. "Come in then. I'll give you something to eat. You'll get sick standing there." The stranger took a few steps, then collapsed in the middle of the yard. Startled, Mr. Toma ran to him and lifted him up. The man was tall, but shockingly light, like he had no life left in him. Unconscious, limbs limp, he looked barely alive. Mr. Toma laid him down on the mat. Worried, he touched the man's nose. He was still breathing. Relieved, he brushed the wet hair away and saw a face, young, gaunt, no older than 30. "Leanne," he said, "go fetch a thermos of hot water, a clean towel, and a basin." She rushed inside, relieved the stranger was still alive. Mr. Toma poured warm water into the basin and began gently wiping the man's face. Slowly, the stranger came to. He blinked, eyes dazed, and suddenly jerked upright, pushing Mr. Toma away in fear. "What are you doing to me?" Mr. Toma stumbled back, amused more than angry. The man feared him? He chuckled and said, "You fainted. I was just trying to help." The stranger didn't answer, only stared blankly out at the rain. Mr. Toma nodded to Leanne. "Pour the water out and clean up." Lion obeyed. As the stranger glanced her way, their eyes met. Suddenly, Lion screamed. The basin dropped from her hands and clattered loudly. Mr. Toma froze. Lion had screamed. After 4 years of silence, she screamed. But before he could make sense of it, the stranger lunged. He moved like lightning, tackling Leon to the ground and wrapping his hands tightly around her throat. She screamed again, then fell silent, his grip like steel. It took Mr. Toma several seconds to process what was happening. Then he shouted, voice cracking, "You bastard! What do you think you're doing?" Without hesitation, he charged at the madman to pull him off his daughter. But to his horror, the boy who moments ago had seemed as fragile as paper now had an unnatural strength. With a single swing of his arm, he sent Mr. Toma flying across the yard. Stunned, he scrambled to his feet and lunged again to save his child. He pushed with all his might, but the attacker didn't even flinch. He wasn't paying attention to Mr. Toma at all. His focus was locked entirely on tightening his grip around Lan's throat. Lan's eyes bulged, mouth agape, tongue lolling out. Her breathing was labored, rasping, gasping. Her small hands feebly tried to pry his away, feet kicking wildly, but her strength was fading fast. Saliva foamed at her lips. She gagged twice and then began to retch. Only then did the madman release her, stepping back to observe. Lan dug her fingers into her mouth, vomiting in dry heaves. Then came the contents of her dinner, spilled onto the cold brick floor, and among the mess, something emerged. A long, dark slime, almost like a black leech, the length of a finger, wriggling in the vomit. Both Mr. Toma and the stranger stared in stunned silence. Then the young man pulled a dagger from his belt, its blade gleaming about 8 inches long, and lunged toward the girl. Mr. Toma froze, but his instincts as a father took over. He grabbed the thermos still lying nearby and roared, "You dog, you try that again and I'll kill you!" With all his might, he smashed the thermos onto the man's head. The lid burst, sending boiling water across the stranger's back. He howled in pain, but didn't stop, his dagger still aimed toward Lian. There was no time to react. Lan let out a final terrified scream, and the blade came down, not on her, but on the black slime. The man had plunged the dagger deep into the creature on the ground, pinning it to the brick floor. Then he released the hilt. Only now did the pain from the burns overwhelm him. Clutching his face in agony, his eyes locked onto Leon with something like desperation, and he collapsed, unconscious. Mr. Toma stood motionless for a moment, his breath caught in his throat. Then he rushed to Leon and held her tightly in his arms, gently stroking her hair. "Are you okay?" he whispered. But Leon didn't tremble like he did. She stepped calmly toward the unconscious man, looking down at him. Mr. Toma, still shaken, followed. The burn had badly scalded the man's skin. His face and neck blistered, flesh peeling in raw pink patches. It looked agonizing. Mr. Toma swallowed hard and recoiled, then spat angrily on the ground beside him. "This guy's insane," he snapped. "If I hadn't stopped him, he'd have killed you." Then he pointed and barked, "Put on a raincoat and run to Uncle Two's house. Tell him to come tie this lunatic up. I'll get some rope from the kitchen." But Leanne didn't move. She stood perfectly still, staring not at the man, but at the blade still embedded in the bricks. Mr. Toma followed her gaze. The dagger had sunk straight into the stone. Either the blade was extremely sharp, or the man incredibly strong. It pierced straight through the black slime, which now lay lifeless beneath it. The handle was black, the blade polished steel, and on the flat of the blade was a single engraved character, Vu. Just looking at it gave Mr. Toma chills. The dagger radiated an eerie, sacred energy. Then he heard it, a voice, soft, clear, gentle. Even though the rain roared outside, he heard it perfectly, because it was a voice he had longed for every day, every hour, every night for 4 years. His mute daughter was speaking. "Dad?" Mr. Toma froze. He turned slowly toward her, heart pounding, and then she said it again. "Dad, we need to help him first. He's hurt badly. We can talk about everything else later." Her voice was small, stammering, but real. After 4 years, Leon had spoken. She didn't understand the storm of emotion surging in her father. She simply walked over and knelt beside the unconscious man. Mr. Toma followed, trembling. He leaned in close, checking the boy's breathing. Still alive. Thank heaven. He turned to Leon. "Go get Uncle Two." As Leon ran off, he picked up his phone and saw someone he trusted more than anyone. Miss Liu. Miss Liu was 27 years old, tall, elegant, and beautiful. She had graduated from Saigon Medical University, but chose not to work in a hospital. Instead, she worked at her family's private clinic. Her father, Dr. Lloyd, was the head neurologist at the county hospital. He had opened the clinic for her, hoping to train his daughter in both practice and management. Over time, she had become confident in her role, managing a large, bustling clinic with many departments, doctors, and staff, almost like a private hospital. Long ago, when Mr. Toma's wife was still alive, she had been Miss Liu's middle school teacher, the kind of teacher students never forgot. After his wife's passing, Lo remained close to the family, helping where she could, especially after Kenji left home. So, whenever something serious happened, Mr. Toma always called her. That rainy night, she was sleeping in her office at the clinic when the phone rang. Hearing the frantic story, she immediately told Mr. Toma to bring the man in, not to a public hospital, which would be tangled with procedures and questions. She also called in 2 other doctors to assist. Together they treated the burns, bandaged the wounds, and ran full checkups through the night, but the stranger remained unconscious. Mr. Toma and Uncle Two waited anxiously in the hallway until finally Miss Liu stepped out. "This is complicated," she said softly. "Don't report anything to the police yet. We should wait until he wakes up. I'll arrange a psychiatric evaluation as well. If he's truly mentally ill and you file a report, you might be held responsible for his injuries. Mr. Toma paled. He had only tried to defend his daughter. Now he might face legal consequences. What if the man died? Even if it was self-defense, could he be charged with manslaughter? Why had this madness come crashing into his quiet life? Miss Lu gently reassured him, told him to go home and keep quiet for now. She promised to call when the boy regained consciousness. After much hesitation, and with encouragement from both Lu and Uncle Tu, Mr. Toma finally returned home. The stranger stayed behind, unconscious in the care of the clinic. By the next morning, the nurse reported that the stranger had regained consciousness. As soon as Miss Lu heard the news, she rushed to his room. She entered quietly, pulling a chair close to the bed where the young man now sat, silent and motionless. His gaze was fixed beyond the window, expression unreadable. His head had been completely shaved, his face and scalp tightly bandaged with only his eyes, nose, and mouth visible. Frail and skeletal in his hospital gown, his left arm was still wrapped, and his right was inflamed with bluish veins showing through the skin, connected to an IV drip. From his throat down to his chest, large patches of white burn marks could be seen. His collarbones, wrists, knees, every bone seemed to protrude as if he were nothing but skin stretched over a frame. There was something deeply unusual about him. Miss Lu had seen many patients sick, mad, dying, but the aura that clung to him was none of those. There was a strange, unsettling dignity to him, something sacred and frightening. It wasn't the scent of a dying man, though it reminded her of it. It was colder, more distant, less human. He didn't acknowledge her presence, didn't speak, just sat there with sunken eyes, staring at the ceiling. She tried. "How are you feeling?" No answer. "Do you have any family? Anyone we can contact?" A slow shake of the head. She pressed further, gently. "It was raining that night. You entered a stranger's home. You attacked a little girl. Then you got burned. Do you remember how that happened?" He didn't reply. Instead, he stretched his body, then casually reached for the IV needle and pulled it out. Miss Lu gasped, standing. "Wait, don't! You're still receiving medication!" But he ignored her, tossing the tube to the floor. Then he reached for the bandages around his face. "No!" she shouted, stepping forward. "You were severely burned. Those bandages need to stay on. The wounds aren't healed yet." But he paid her no mind and continued peeling off the wraps. What she saw next made her cry out in disbelief. His burns were healing. The deep blistered wounds from last night were nearly gone. The skin underneath, although pale and raw, was clearly regenerating. New. Miss Lu said nothing. She stared, stunned. Was he even human? He glanced at her and said plainly, "Sorry, Doc, it was itchy." She nodded slowly, struggling to find words. Then asked again, "Can you tell me what happened that night?" He turned to face her, and for the first time their eyes met. It wasn't the gaze of a madman. It was sharp, lucid, unflinching, even proud. Miss Leo froze under its weight. Something about it was too intense, too clear. She had to look away. Then he spoke, calmly, clearly. "I attacked the girl and fell into the boiling water. That's how I got burned." And with that, he turned away again, gazing out the window in silence. Miss Lu stood there, deeply unsettled. His clarity, his admission, his intention, it didn't match what she had expected from someone insane. If he was capable of rationalizing, remembering, even shielding Mr. Toma from legal harm, then who was he really? She was about to say more when he waved a hand, signaling her to leave. Reluctantly, she stood and said, "I'll come check on you again. Please rest." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her at the door. "My knife, where is it?" Miss Lu turned, surprised. "What knife?" He gave her a long, disappointed look, but said nothing more, just turned back to the window. 3 days later, the full medical report came back. The burns had healed. All other results were unremarkable. Miss Lu called Mr. Toma. He arrived in under 10 minutes, Lan clinging closely to his side. Miss Liu greeted them. "Uncle, I have the full results. There's something we need to talk about. Please come in." Mr. Toma nodded, asked Lian to wait outside, and followed her into the private office. Meanwhile, Lian sat quietly on the waiting bench. But her thoughts weren't still. From the first moment she saw that strange man drenched in the rain, something inside her had stirred. His gaze had pierced her deeply. It wasn't just fear. It was something else, an uneasiness, a curiosity, a pull. That night when he grabbed her throat, she'd been terrified. But she remembered something her father didn't see. He had loosened his grip before she lost consciousness. She had felt it. He hadn't meant to harm her. It was as if he had been trying to help. During those final moments, she realized his hands were pressing not to choke her, but to force something out from deep within her. Then the vomiting, then the black slime, then the knife. He had stabbed it, not her. Lian understood. Somehow in that chaos, she had understood. But she hadn't been able to explain it to her father. And now, since that night, she had lost her voice again. No matter how hard she tried, her throat would only produce hoarse, broken whispers. She practiced every day. Still nothing. That Sunday morning, Mr. Toma asked if she wanted to accompany him to visit the man again. She didn't hesitate. Tossing her book aside, she jumped off the bed and rushed to get dressed. And now they were here. As her father and Miss Liu entered the office, Lian hopped off the bench and began peeking around the clinic. She wanted to find him. At the far end of the hallway was a special room, different from the others. It had a small glass window at adult eye level, likely designed for monitoring unstable patients. Her instincts told her this was it. Carefully, she tiptoed closer, peeking through the window. There he was, sitting with his back to the door, facing a small window across the room. Even from behind, she knew it was him. His thin frame, the white bandages, the sunken shoulders. She could see the ridges of his spine beneath the hospital gown. Suddenly he turned. Lian gasped and ducked down. Did he see her? She waited, then slowly rose again, heart racing. He was walking toward the door, looking directly through the glass, right at her. She froze. Fear rooted her in place. Then the door creaked open. He stood before her, face pale, eyes watchful. Recognition dawned in his expression. They stared at each other. Then he spoke, halting, unsure. "You, little girl?" It was such a clumsy sentence, Lian couldn't help but giggle. Her fear evaporated, but then he winced, clutching his head in sudden pain. He stumbled back to the bed and collapsed, groaning, face twisted in agony. Lian panicked. The hallway was deserted. She tried to call for help, but only muffled gasps came from her throat. She ran into the room, grabbed his hand, tried to shake him awake. Then, he sat up in a flash and grabbed her by the throat, just like that night. She tried to scream again, but her tongue wouldn't obey. Only garbled sounds escaped her lips. She clawed at his arm, but his grip was like steel. Lian saw his face twisted in rage. His eyes were bloodshot and wild. Veins throbbed beneath his skin, his jaw clenched tight. He gripped her neck with the fury of someone choking a mortal enemy. Her eyes widened, mouth gaping, tears and snot streaming down her face. She flailed, kicked, clawed, but his grip was like cold iron. Her strength drained quickly, her limbs weakened, and she began to fade. Then, suddenly a voice, low, warm, gentle. Not the clumsy voice he'd used before. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Don't be afraid." And somehow, she wasn't. Though her throat felt on the verge of snapping, her head was spinning and every breath was thin and broken. That one sentence calmed her heart. It was like hearing the voice of a mountain, deep, vast, eternal. A tone that carried the weight of the earth and the secrets of the stars. Her heart steadied. She clenched her teeth, endured the pain in her neck, closed her eyes, and surrendered. She placed her life in the hands of a madman. Then, a chill, a shiver ran through her body as goosebumps rose all over. She felt it clearly. A cool hand pressed against her chest. She opened her eyes. His right hand was still around her throat, pinning her in place. but his left was resting gently over her heart. Fear returned. She tried to scream, but his grip tightened. She struck him, clawed at his face, but he didn't let go. Then he yanked open her shirt, snapping the buttons, exposing her bare chest. Swiftly, he raised his bandaged left hand and bit into his own finger, hard. Blood poured. With shaking fingers, he traced a circle of blood directly over her heart. And just as he finished, Leon began to retch. He released her. She collapsed, gasping, coughing violently. Her body convulsed as she vomited everything: food, bile, stomach acid. And in the midst of it all, a black, wriggling slime crawled from her throat. Meanwhile, in Miss Lu's office, she locked the door and turned to Mr. Toma. "Uncle," she said, "I've never seen a case like this. When he first arrived, his burns were severe, skin peeling, hair gone, his face and neck practically raw. But by the next morning, the wounds had almost healed. Today, there's barely a scar left. I can take you to see for yourself." Mr. Toma let out a sigh of relief. "That's good news. So he won't press charges? If he did, I'd be jailed for sure." Miss Lu couldn't help but smile at his honest anxiety. "Don't worry, I spoke with him. He said he won't blame you for anything." "That's a relief," Mr. Toma chuckled. "But you didn't need to call me here. You could have just told me over the phone. I'm not interested in visiting him. I'm still mad about what he did to my daughter. If he weren't sick, I'd have given him a good beating, charges or not." Miss Lu's tone grew serious. "It's not about charges. If the police get involved, things could escalate, whether he reports you or not. You did injure him, and that could get complicated. That's why I called you in. He's admitted the burns were self-inflicted, so no one needs to know what really happened. Please tell your neighbor and Leon to keep quiet too." Mr. Toma nodded slowly. "But is he really insane? Or is he faking it?" Lo replied. "We'll need more time to be sure. I ran brain scans and other diagnostics. Everything looks normal. I think he's suffering from some kind of psychological trauma. Sometimes he acts like a child. Other times he's sharp and composed. It's not a developmental disorder. It's more like a fractured mind. He doesn't remember anything, not even his own name. So yes, he's mentally unstable, but not simple-minded." Mr. Toma rubbed his chin. "So what now? He's healed. No family. Should we send him to an institution? Or just let him go?" Lu hesitated. "He's not ready. His body is riddled with issues. When we shaved his head for treatment, we discovered a severe fungal infection. His scalp was in terrible shape. He's severely malnourished. He's 6 feet tall, but weighs only 99 pounds. His skin clings to his bones, and worse, he's covered in scars and infected wounds. He must have been living rough for a long time." She lowered her voice. "Also, when we changed his bandages, he had an episode. He attacked a doctor during a seizure, and his body has other strange signs I can't even explain yet. I want to transfer him to a psychiatric facility, but not until he stabilizes more." Mr. Toma's eyes widened. "He's that sick?" Lu nodded solemnly. "He's been living in constant pain, multiple broken bones. I don't even know how he survived. His x-rays show that nearly every major bone in his body was once fractured. They've healed, but poorly. It looks like he suffered a terrible accident, maybe crushed or fell from great height, and never received proper care. There's even a massive scar on his abdomen that never received stitches. He's a walking miracle, or tragedy. This man didn't fake madness to assault children or steal. If I had to guess, he was once a dangerous man, a fighter, someone who lost everything." Mr. Toma blinked. "A gang member?" Lo nodded again, lowering her voice even more. "When we removed the bandages on his left arm, the one he always keeps wrapped, I found strange symbols tattooed across it, and across his back, a horrifying image." Mr. Toma leaned in. "What kind of image?" she whispered. "A demon, horned, fanged, clenching a knife between its jaws. I'm telling you, he must have been a notorious figure before losing his memory." Mr. Toma shivered. He fell silent for a long moment before asking quietly, "So, what about the treatment costs?" Lou smiled gently. If the mental hospital accepts him, they'll cover the expenses. Since he's not pressing charges and there's no police report, you have no legal responsibility. If anyone asks, just say you found him injured and brought him here. Don't worry. Her words brought visible relief to Mr. Toma. He stood up and grasped her hands. Thank you, Miss Lou. I'm just a poor farmer. I wouldn't have known what to do without your help. You saved me and my daughter. Miss Lou smiled warmly, squeezing his hand in return. Uncle, it's nothing. Your late wife taught me in school. Everything I am now, I owe to her. Helping you and Leon is like helping my own family. Don't thank me. This is what friends are for. They laughed, lighthearted at last. Miss Lou led the way out of the office. Mr. Toma followed behind. As he watched her walk ahead, tall, graceful in her white coat, dark hair swaying behind her, he couldn't help but feel deep gratitude. Truly a blessing in his life. This woman, educated, kind, principled, a rare gem. She had not only helped him, but had shown compassion even to a nameless stranger. A real healer in every sense. And he thought to himself, if one day Leon grows up to be even half the woman Miss Lou is, I will die with no regrets. Just as Mr. Toma and Miss Lou stepped out of the consultation room, both stopped in their tracks. Down the hallway, near the last patient room, a small crowd had gathered. Nurses, patients, all whispering anxiously and peering inside. Miss Lou's heart skipped. Uncle, she said sharply, something's happened. That's his room. Mr. Toma's eyes scanned the corridor. Lan was gone. His heart dropped. Legs trembling, he let out a sharp yell and broke into a run. Miss Lou, now understanding the urgency, ran after him. As they reached the room, the crowd dispersed at the sight of Miss Lou's white coat. Inside, Leon stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded tightly across her chest, trying to cover her torn shirt. Her face was pale, her eyes strangely calm. On the floor lay a pool of vomit, thick and foul. Wriggling inside it was a familiar black slime. On the bed lay the strange man, unconscious, blood dripping from his mouth. A male doctor was binding both his hands to the bed frame with gauze straps, while other staff looked on. Mr. Toma rushed to his daughter, cradling her. Lan, are you all right? What happened? Before she could answer, Miss Lou had made her way to the bedside. She touched the doctor's shoulder. Dr. Fook, what's going on? Why are you restraining him? What happened? Dr. Fook stood, having just finished tying the man's wrists. He spoke curtly. He attacked the girl. She couldn't scream. She's mute. We were examining a patient in the next room when we heard the scuffle and the sounds of vomiting. We rushed in and found this. I restrained him. Was going to notify you after securing the patient, but here you are. Miss Lou's voice sharpened. You restrained him by knocking him unconscious? It was an emergency. I had no choice, Fook said flatly before walking out. Miss Lou scowled at his back. There was something about him, arrogant, cold. If he hadn't been her father's favorite student, she would have had him removed long ago. Turning back, she gestured for the staff and bystanders to clear the room, then approached Leon. Are you hurt? She didn't expect an answer, but Leon replied softly, I'm all right, sister. Both Mr. Toma and Miss Lou stared at her, stunned. She stood motionless, eyes still brimming with tears, hands gripping her shirt tightly. Without a word, Miss Lou grabbed a patient's robe from the coat rack and wrapped it gently around the girl. Mr. Toma, tears now mixing with relief, exclaimed, You see, Miss Lou, I told you. That day, I really heard her speak. Miss Lou, flustered, could only smile weakly. She turned back to Leon. We'll do a full check later, but tell me, did you know he was mentally unstable? He tried to hurt you once. Why did you come in here again? Did he drag you in? Leon's voice, though soft, rang with calm certainty. No, he didn't hurt me, and he's not insane. He was trying to kill that. She pointed at the slime now slithering toward the door. Both Miss Lou and Mr. Toma followed her finger. Mr. Toma gasped. It looked exactly like the one from before. Another one? Miss Lou knelt down and examined it carefully. The black slime wriggled, grotesque, across the floor. It resembled a leech, the kind found in wet rice fields, bloodsuckers. She hesitated, then asked, "You threw this up? It was inside you?" Leon nodded. "Yes, just like last time. He gripped my throat to force it out. Once I vomited, he let me go. That's when the other doctor hit him." Mr. Toma asked, "Then what happened to your shirt?" Still holding the robe close, Leon hesitated, then lowered her hands to reveal a faint red mark across her chest. But strangely, the blood circle she had seen earlier was now completely gone. Flustered, she looked toward the man on the bed and whispered, He did something." Miss Lou and Mr. Toma exchanged a glance and moved toward the bed. He lay still, eyes closed. Blood crusted at his lips and nose. His wrists were tied down. On his left index finger, the bite mark still leaked faintly. Mr. Toma studied his face carefully now. The other night, the rain and his long hair had obscured it, but now he could see. His cheeks were sunken, chin narrow, cheekbones sharp, eyes closed, sockets deep, forehead bony. Faint scars crossed his skin like old buried memories, and yet there was something pure about his face, a strange, haunting beauty, a delicate quality. Eyes with long corners. If they were open, they might seem painted on. He looked like someone who had suffered much, who had seen too much, who had walked through fire and survived. Suddenly, Mr. Toma didn't feel fear or hatred. He felt pity. If what Leon said was true, this man had sensed something dark inside her and had tried to help in the only way he knew how. Miss Lowe leaned in and carefully began untying the straps. Mr. Toma panicked. "Is that safe?" "He's been calm for days," she replied. "And if he wakes up to find himself bound again, it might worsen things. People with trauma are sensitive to restraint." She gently released both hands, then pressed a spot on his wrist to stir him awake. His eyes opened slowly. He sat up in panic, backing into the corner of the bed, eyes wide with fear. Miss Lou saw it immediately. This was why he had confessed to everything so easily, why he took the blame. Somewhere in his past, someone had forced him to confess again and again until he stopped resisting. Her heart ached. She turned to Mr. Toma. He met her eyes and gave a silent nod. They both understood. This man didn't need chains, he needed compassion. Miss Lou sat beside him, took his hand gently, and asked, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "I'm fine." Miss Lou smiled. "You look older than me. Don't call me that. I'm not that old." Mr. Toma chuckled, but the man just looked down, silent. Then his eyes shifted, searching. They landed on Lon. She instinctively stepped behind her father, hiding from his gaze. But when she moved, his eyes caught something else. The slime. It had reached the doorway. In an instant, he leapt from the bed. Miss Lil gasped, "Uncle Toma, hold him back!" Mr. Toma lunged forward, but the man simply swatted him aside. With terrifying strength, he broke free, dashed to the doorway, and raised his fist high. Before anyone could stop him, he slammed his fist down, again and again on the black slime. It splattered, bursting open, but he didn't stop. He kept punching over and over, knuckles cracking, skin tearing, blood mixing with the mess on the floor. Even when the thing had been crushed beyond recognition, he kept going, his hands pounding the tile floor until blood spattered up his arms. Then he rose, panting, and turned back toward Mr. Toma, eyes blazing. "Where's my knife? Give it back to me." Mr. Toma flinched. He wasn't sure if it was real, but in that moment, it seemed the man's eyes were burning from within, like coals, like something ancient was glowing deep behind them. Miss Lowe raised her voice, trying to reason with him. Maybe you're afraid of that creature? Some kind of phobia? That's why you reacted like that?" The man turned to her, voice low and insistent. "I don't want any knife. I want my knife. Return it to me." At that moment, two nurses peeked in, curious about the commotion. Miss Lou pointed to the crushed slime and the pool of vomit, signaling silently. The nurses understood immediately. One disappeared into the bathroom to grab cleaning supplies. The other slipped on gloves and picked up the remains. As she exited the room, the man shouted, "Burn it! Throw it into fire! The nurse startled, turning to Miss Lowe for approval. She nodded discreetly. With the remains removed, the man's energy seemed to drain. His eyes softened. Then, suddenly, he collapsed. Miss Lou and Mr. Toma rushed forward. His limbs dangled, limp and weightless. His skin was cold. There was no strength left in his bones, just a frail shell, as if all his life had poured out with the shouting and the blood. Together, they carried him back to the bed. Miss Lou called for assistance. Within minutes, a doctor arrived with a mild sedative. He injected it gently into the man's arm. And just like that, the man fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Ralph said softly. After the chaos had settled, Miss Lou gently gestured for everyone to leave the room. When only Mr. Toma remained, she turned to him and said softly, "You've done enough, Uncle. You can go home now. We'll take care of him here for a few more days and observe. After that, the authorities will handle his case. I believe a psychiatric hospital might accept him." Mr. Toma and Leanne exchanged a glance. He seemed hesitant, troubled. What was this feeling? He couldn't quite name it. He feared the man, but he pitied him even more. There was something unsettling about him, yes. But behind the fear, Mr. Toma couldn't ignore the pain, physical, mental, and spiritual, that this man carried. What kind of future awaited someone like him? With a mind clouded by madness, no family, no money. If he were lucky enough to be admitted to an asylum, would he simply lie in a bed for the rest of his life? Would he even be aware of his suffering? Or perhaps, maybe it was better that he wasn't aware. Maybe madness was heaven's mercy, a quiet release for the tormented soul, a way to numb the pain of existence. What sin, what karmic burden had he committed to be trapped in such a fate? Pity the sick, the broken ones, the poor with nowhere to rest, wandering hearts with no refuge, a life unloved, unblessed. Pity the old and lonely, the children lost in the crowd, begging just for a meal, while the world rushes loud. Pity the mindless wanderers who live without a clue, moving like mere shadows, their paths hidden from view. Suddenly, Leanne tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can we take him home with us?" Mr. Toma and Miss Lou both turned to look at her. Miss Lou asked gently, "You're not scared of him?" Leanne shook her head. Miss Lou smiled, ruffled her hair, and chuckled. "Such a kind little girl. One day your father will be lucky to have you by his side. But for now, go on home. We'll figure out the rest later." After seeing them off, Miss Lowe returned quietly to the hospital room. She sat beside the sleeping man, her eyes drawn to the deeply lined face, like a storm-weathered stone. He was beautiful, not in the usual way, not by ordinary standards. There was something haunting in his features, something drifting and mysterious, like a spirit caught between realms. Men like him always carried that kind of beauty, but his suffering, that was real. Miss Lou gazed at him with a heavy heart. He slept so peacefully, like a child. What had he gone through to end up like this? Had his parents abandoned him at birth, fearing his illness? How had he survived all these years, alone in this harsh world? Would he ever be lucid enough to tell her? She knew she was breaking the rules. As a nurse, she wasn't supposed to get involved. But something about this man stirred her curiosity beyond reason. She couldn't look away. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "I'm worried about that little girl. She's not just mute, she's being followed. A spirit clings to her. Soon she'll go deaf, then blind, and after that, she'll die." Miss Lou froze. A chill rushed down her spine. Her skin bristled. The voice had come from the man. He hadn't moved. His eyes remained closed, face turned toward the wall. But the words were clear, spoken with perfect articulation, not the ramblings of a madman, but the voice of someone fully aware. That evening, after dinner, Mr. Toma sat across from Leanne at the table, wearing a face clouded with concern. Since they got home, the child hadn't spoken a single word, not even one. Her last sentence had been at the hospital, asking if they could bring the strange man home. After that, silence. He had tried to coax her into talking, telling jokes, asking questions. But all she did was grimace and point at her throat, lips trembling, unable to speak. He sighed and told her to go to bed. After tucking Leon into bed, Mr. Toma remembered something. He rushed to the kitchen, opened the utensil drawer, and pulled out a knife. Sleek, elegant, handcrafted from an unfamiliar, shimmering metal. He had forgotten it entirely until now. He brought it to the living room, lit a lamp, and studied it under the light. The blade gleamed unnaturally. Along its side, the word "Vu" shimmered faintly, etched into the metal. It sent a cold shiver through him. What was this knife? He recalled the creature, slimy and persistent, how nothing else could kill it. Even when sliced, it would squirm for minutes. But this knife, one strike, and it died instantly. He thought back to the hospital. The moment the man had seen the slime, he demanded this knife. Just like when he used it in the garden, it couldn't be a coincidence. Was the blade poisoned somehow? He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the backyard. Digging into the soil, he quickly found an earthworm. He cut it with the knife. The worm squirmed, curled, and writhed, but it didn't die instantly. Strange. So it wasn't poison. He wiped the blade clean and returned inside. Placing the knife on the tea table just beneath the family altar, he struck a single stick of incense. It was the full moon. He had completely forgotten. With errands and the visit to Miss Lou, there had been no time to buy offerings. Still, he lit the incense with a prayer in his heart. That would be enough. Standing before the altar, he whispered a few clumsy prayers to his ancestors and the kitchen gods. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew in from the garden, cold, unnatural. It swept through the house, brushing past his back, the same direction the knife lay. Startled, he opened his eyes. The incense stick on the altar was burning fiercely. Panicked, he leaned forward to blow out the flame. Wisps of smoke rose in spirals. Then another gust of wind. Leaves rustled outside, whispering like voices in the dark, moaning, wailing. Ooh, he felt a presence behind him. 2 eyes, watching. He spun around. The knife lay motionless on the table, yet his skin prickled. A wave of goosebumps erupted along his arms. Then a scream from Lion's room. Daddy, help me! He bolted down the hallway, flung the door open, and found her on the bed, arms raised, clawing at the air. Was she sleep-talking? No, she had spoken. Mr. Toma rushed over and shook her. Lan, sweetheart, I'm here. It's okay. But her eyes were wide open, glassy, unblinking. He shook her harder. Lan, wake up! She didn't respond, only groaned. A horrible sound stuck in her throat. Panicked, he slapped her lightly on the cheek. Her body jolted. She sat up and threw her arms around him, sobbing. I'm here, he whispered, holding her tight. It was just a dream. You're safe. She pointed frantically at her throat again. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. What had she seen? What kind of nightmare could force her voice out, only to take it away again? He held her until she calmed. She refused to sleep alone that night. So he brought her into his bed, tucked the netting, and lay beside her. Slowly her breath softened. She drifted off, and eventually so did he, forgetting that the knife still lay beneath the altar, that the incense still burned, its flame not yet gone. That night, as the world outside fell into silence, the winds rose without warning. They howled. They danced through the trees, the slender bamboo stalks, the creeping vines, the shrubs along the garden's edge, all rustling, bowing, as if stirred by an unseen command. And then, from within the house, from the tea table beneath the family altar, where the knife lay still, a thin veil of smoke began to rise, pale, phantom-like. It twisted and curled, coiling in silence, and from the center of that smoke a shadow emerged. It was not whole. It hovered like a bat, only half a form, its lower body missing. 2 arms dangled in the air, fleshless, nothing but bones. One hand held a paper talisman, the other a sand glass, and its eyes burned. Twin flames flickering deep in dark sockets. The specter drifted, soundless, toward the bed where father and daughter slept. Just then, a dark mist seeped from Leon's lips, thick and black. It slithered upward, shaping itself into the form of a slime, a shadow creature without a name. The thing crawled across her face, and from its form, yet another veil of darkness began to rise, growing, gathering. But the specter spoke, its voice a sharp command. "You filthy stray of a hungry ghost, be gone or die." At once, the black mist recoiled. The shadow fled. The slime dissolved into nothingness, vanished without a trace. And so the spirit remained, hovering, watching, its fiery eyes fixed on the sleeping child and her weary father. It did not move. It did not breathe. It simply stood guard. Elsewhere, in the dreamscape of Mr. Thoma's mind, he found himself sitting in the middle of the yard. It was pitch black, no lights, no moon. He called out, "Leanne, where are you?" No reply. His heart pounded. He tried to stand, but his legs would not move. They were rooted, frozen. He felt his limbs turn limp like water. His body lost weight. And then 2 hands appeared behind him, covering his eyes. Everything went dark. He wanted to scream, to pull the hands away, but his own arms, dead and still. He tried to shout for Liam, but then another hand, cold as ice, clamped over his mouth. He could not speak. He could not move. He could not see. He sat paralyzed as the darkness swirled around him. Then he heard a voice, low, whispering, both tender and accusing. "Old man, have you gone mad? You dare touch the sacred blade of our 9th ancestor?" Then came laughter, bone-chilling, cruel, echoing through his ears like wind through a graveyard. And then the hands vanished. They turned into mist and faded into the night. His eyes opened. The world slowly returned. And there, in front of him, just a few feet away, a ghost. Its wings curled like a bat, hovering on a current of dark smoke. In one hand, the sandglass ticked. In the other, the talisman fluttered. And its eyes, those blazing, endless eyes, locked onto his soul. Mr. Thoma froze, paralyzed by terror. The ghost before him raised one bony hand to its mouth, chanting in a language not of this world. Then it dropped the hourglass it held. The moment it touched the ground, fire erupted. Flames burst forth, unnatural, wild, spreading across the yard with impossible speed. There was no fuel, no dry grass, no spark. And yet, the fire leapt. Mr. Thoma screamed, trying to get up, but his limbs were stiff, unmoving. He looked down in horror. 2 black-legged, smoky hands clutched each of his arms and legs. He thrashed. Useless. Then in desperation, he cried out, "Leanne, my daughter!" The ghost hovered over him, lips curled in a grin sharp as broken glass. It laughed, a shrill, piercing sound that split the night like a knife. And then it chanted again, louder this time, the words like claws scraping bone. "You get to live tonight," the ghost hissed, "so you can bring my kin back to this house. Fail, and I'll drag your daughter, your bloodline, your entire family down to the grave." And with that, it vanished. So did the black hands. One by one, they dissolved into smoke, evaporating into the night air. Mr. Thoma jolted awake. He gasped, heart pounding like a drum. For a moment, the world was still. Then he turned sharply. Leanne was still beside him, sleeping peacefully, her head resting on his arm. He blinked, eyes sweeping the room. Then he saw it, a flicker of fire at the altar. A single incense stick had fallen. It had landed on a stack of joss paper, thin, dry, golden offerings. The flames had just begun to take hold. Without thinking, Mr. Thoma sprang from the bed, switched on the lights, and leapt onto the altar table. He grabbed the stack of paper, now half charred, and slapped at the flames with frantic hands. Smoke curled into his face. Ash floated in the air. He smothered the incense, stomped out the burning papers in the yard, stood there for a moment, barefoot, breathless, watching the last cinders go out. Then he quietly stepped back inside. He glanced toward the bed. Leanne still slept soundly. He wiped a long streak of sweat from his cheek, only to realize his whole body was soaked. Sweat clung to his shirt, beaded at his brow, trickled down his spine. His eyes drifted toward the tea table. The knife was still there, silent, still. His hand trembled as he reached for it. Slowly, cautiously, he held it up to the light, examined every curve, every scratch, every line. Was it just a nightmare? He didn't know, but the fire had been real. A few minutes later, and it could have caught up the oil lamp, the wooden beams. It could have taken the house, his daughter, that ghost. What was it? It had mentioned the knife, or had he imagined that too? Miss Lou sat at her desk, lost in a sea of papers. The door creaked open. A tall man in uniform stepped in, broad-shouldered, sharp-featured, his presence calm yet commanding. "Still working on a Sunday?" he asked with a gentle smile. "Any time for a visitor from afar?" Miss Lou looked up and smiled faintly. She closed her laptop, stood, and motioned toward the chair across from her. Officer Hyde took the seat as she prepared a small pot of tea. "I've been swamped," she said, handing him a warm cup. "I've taken on a particularly complicated case." "Another tough one?" he asked, amused. "Aren't they all?" She smiled but didn't answer. "It's psychological," she said after a pause. "The patient is difficult. I've been reading up on similar cases. I need to be sure." Hyde nodded. "Right up your alley," he said. "Mind sharing the details?" She hesitated. "It's a man with memory loss, severe disorientation, not violent but unstable. I need more time to understand what's going on inside him." Hyde sipped his tea. "You always take these things seriously." "And you?" she asked, changing the subject. "How's that case in Fuktak Village, the missing girl?" He fell quiet, then shook his head. "Still missing." Lou poured him more tea. "I don't want to talk about work today," I said, forcing a laugh. "Come have a drink with me. Just one, for old time's sake." She looked apologetic. "I can't. I've got to give medicine to a patient. I've been handling his case personally. I don't trust anyone else with it." High smiled, though a shadow crossed his face. He had grown used to her always being busy. In the 4 years they'd known each other, he had pursued her steadily, and still her walls remained. He never pressed, never complained, but today he couldn't help but sigh. "I drove 20 kilometers to see you," he said. "Won't even let me keep you company?" Lou laughed softly. "I'll be back soon, just a quick injection." "Let me come with you," he said. "I promise I won't interfere. Think of it as a new experience." She thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right," she said, "but don't say a word. The patient is easily agitated." He followed her down the corridor. The room at the end of the hall was quiet, sparse, lonely. As Officer Hyde stepped in behind her, his eyes scanned everything, his instincts always alert. There were no decorations, no gifts, nothing to suggest anyone had visited the patient. The man inside was young, perhaps 30. He sat up as the door opened. When he saw Miss Lou, he smiled. He barely glanced at Hyde. Lou walked to his bedside. "How are you feeling today?" she asked gently. "I feel fine now," the man said. "Can I go home?" Hyde stifled a laugh. Lou didn't react. She was composed, kind. She took the patient's hand and spoke softly. "Not yet, but I have good news. I've found a hospital that's agreed to take you in. They'll come tomorrow to handle the paperwork. You won't have to worry about food or shelter anymore." The patient nodded. He began to unbutton his gown, revealing his back wrapped in thick bandages. Lou knelt beside him and carefully began unwrapping them. Hyde leaned in, curious. What he saw chilled him to the bone. As the last of the white gauze fell away, the man's bare back was revealed. Officer Hyde took a step closer and froze. Wounds covered the skin, long, jagged cuts, some healing, others still raw. But what struck him most was what lay beneath the wounds. A tattoo, dark, large, covering nearly half the man's back. A demon, its horns curled like blades. Its eyes, inked with uncanny detail, seemed to glow as though fire danced within them. The mouth was twisted into a snarl, fangs bared, a gleaming dagger clenched between its teeth. The sight turned Hyde's stomach. He swallowed hard. What did he do for a living?" Hyde asked, voice barely a whisper. Miss Lou stiffened. She turned, her expression sharp. "I told you not to speak." Hyde blinked, surprised by her sudden sternness. "He's suffering from memory loss," she continued, her voice cold. "He doesn't even remember who he is, let alone what he did. How would I know?" "I didn't mean," Hai began. She stood up, facing him. "You're a police officer," she said, "but this is a clinic, a place of healing, not an interrogation room." Then she pointed at the patient. "He may be sick, he may be lost, but he is not deaf. He hears every word." Hai turned to the man, who sat quietly, head bowed, saying nothing. Lu's voice softened. "We don't judge here," she said. "It doesn't matter what he's done. He's my patient. I treat him with the same care I would anyone else. Blood or dirt, saint or sinner, my duty is to heal." Her eyes held his. "If you can't respect that, you're welcome to wait outside." Hai said nothing. He looked again at the tattoo, the fire in those eyes, the blade in its mouth. Then at Miss Lo, her steady hands, her unwavering calm. He nodded. "I'm sorry," he said. Miss Lu returned to her work, silently cleaning the man's wounds. Officer Hai stood at a distance now, watching in silence. She worked with care. Her hands moved gently, unwrapping, wiping, dabbing antiseptic, pressing new gauze. Each step done with patience, with compassion. Not once did her expression waver. She neither flinched nor frowned, even when faced with torn flesh or the grotesque image on the man's back. Hai had known her for years, and yet at that moment she felt like a stranger. No, perhaps not a stranger. Something else, something steadier, stronger. He could not read her heart, but he knew one thing for certain. Her kindness was not weakness. It was steel beneath silk. He looked again at the patient, now quietly lying down again, calm as still water. Hai's mind wandered. What pain lay hidden behind that strange man's silence? What memories had vanished from his mind, leaving only nightmares and a demon tattoo? And who had carved those wounds into his back? The room was quiet. Miss Lo gently pressed the last strip of tape to hold the bandage in place. She helped the man button his gown, then looked toward Hai. "All done," she said softly. "We can go." Hai nodded. They stepped out into the hallway. Outside, the sky was overcast. Light filtered through the windows in long, pale streaks. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Hai said quietly, "You were right. I shouldn't have judged." Lo didn't respond. She simply walked ahead. But her steps were slower now, and as they moved down the hallway together, the silence between them no longer felt cold. It felt respectful. Something had shifted. Something small, but real. The fire on the altar had been extinguished, but the fire in their hearts, whether of fear, sorrow, or quiet resolve, still burned on.